This morning, I'm going to talk about Samatha Vipashyana, which is Sanskrit for mindfulness awareness, which is the Tibetan is Shine and Laktung, ancient way of talking about how to approach awareness practice, in particular in the Mahayana tradition, how to approach training the mind. And I sometimes say shikantaza, or which translates, the Japanese translates as just precisely this, is kind of mixing those together. And this mixing them together is not my invention. Early talk, 1974, Trungpa Rinpoche talked about mixing Samatha Vipashyana together, mindfulness awareness. So basically, Samatha or Shine or mindfulness or resting in tranquility or calm abiding, those are translations of that, what that means, is about holding very still. Hello.
Hello.
And being very precise, seeing the details, all of the different angles and edges of, you could say, of your thought pattern, of your awareness, to be precise, to look at the detail. And in some traditions, most traditions actually, that use these two differentiations, Samatha, Vipassana, mindfulness awareness, teach the mindfulness part first, that first you need to settle down and just calmly abide in order for the awareness, the Vipassana or the panoramic awareness, to start to occur. And I was taught that way in 1973, and when I trained as a meditation instructor under Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in 1978, I also was trained to teach those as separate, emphasizing Shine, emphasizing Samatha, emphasizing mindfulness, emphasizing just precisely, just be here, just watch. And one of the devices, or one of the meditation objects of meditation, was the breath. Follow the breath, the Trungpa Rinpoche's approach. Well, when I first met him, there wasn't really any technique that I can remember. Or maybe I was given one and I forgot it, I don't know. But I don't remember anything very definite. As we went along, there was more and more emphasis on just watching the breath, in particular the out-breath. So follow the out-breath with the awareness, follow the out-breath, follow the out-breath, follow the out-breath, follow the out-breath. And then when thoughts arise, the approach there was label thinking. In other words, see that thoughts are arising. Might take a while before you notice that. And then call that in your mind, in your thinking process, label that thinking, and then go back to the out-breath. That was the dynamic that was set up in order to encourage the simplicity and the focus on the attention onto the particular very simple object of meditation, which was the breath. But also shamatha meditation you could use, in tradition goes back where you can use a small image of the Buddha, where you could use a visual object, you could just look at that. And then there's other ones that are not arising in my awareness right now, but are there. So, having taught that for many, many years and practiced it myself and practiced other creation completion practices, in other words, mantras and mudras and visualization practices that are taught in the Kagyu tradition, Nundro practice, and so on. It slowly began to appear to me, or I began to realize that the way that I really wanted to present this to people, because it had to do with how working with people since 1978, a long time, meeting lots and lots of people, and seeing how they work with the mind and how they work with sitting practice of meditation. And it seemed that a lot of people were creating kind of a strong meditator identity using shamatha, using this breath technique. And this isn't to correct Rinpoche, I wouldn't think of doing that. But it just seemed more important for me and the people I was talking to emphasize, just be there, just sit there. And hold the body still, but don't necessarily go into some kind of a following the breath technique. But unless that's something that you wanted to do, I mean, my instruction that I've been giving the last probably 10 years, if not more, 15 years, has been hold very still and watch what moves. And in this way, not only is the precision of seeing what is moving, not only is that being seen or respected, but also the Vipassana starts to happen naturally in a way that is not promoted by a meditator or a person who is strengthening some kind of identity of someone strengthening the awareness. So it seems to happen more, to use the contemporary word that we hear so much, organically. So the other thing I wanted to say about this was that I could take some questions. This is kind of amazing, but it seems like everybody that I meet and talk to personally, and this may not work if I have hundreds of students, which I do not. But it seems that when I talk to people personally about their practice, people tend to, given that open way of practicing, hold the body very still, extremely still without being rigid, and have all the senses open, and then just observe what's moving. This seems to be a powerful catalyst for one to go to exactly the place in the consciousness, which might be might be the breath. You might actually be following the breath. You might be following the breath for long periods of time. Excuse me. You might use the breath to actually get away from negative thought patterns. So that's another thing that could be aware of. You're aware that you're actually abandoning emotions or feelings or whatever in order to go and attach yourself to thought patterns to get away from that negative feeling. That's still awareness practice. So we have to the area that Trungpa Rinpoche was so well known for is his book Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which was bringing out the tendency of those in the West, and probably back in ancient and earlier times in Tibet also, is a tendency of people to want to use spiritual techniques to get somewhere, to accomplish, to strengthen their the fancy word is siddhi, or powers. And so the practice of shikantaza, or just precisely this, that I learned really before I learned the technique of following the breath and labeling thinking from Trungpa Rinpoche. I learned from Katagiri Roshi. That technique seems to be one that if you do that technique, it seems that the person will naturally, if you have to do enough of it, will naturally gravitate towards that particular dynamic in their mind that needs attention. that needs to be looked at, that needs to be observed, that needs to be observed. And it could be different from one person to the next. So we're not getting rid of getting rid of any of the traditions, or not getting rid of shide or mindfulness or shamatha. We're not getting rid of that by just hanging out, letting whatever comes up. You may actually gravitate towards that. You may go into that more deeply. And there's lots of conceptual ways of working with the mind. There's obstacles and antidotes that are used in shamatha practice and awareness practice. And then there are also 4 foundation practices, which I've studied and taught some. Excuse me, 4 foundations of mindfulness: mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of body, mindfulness of livelihood, mindfulness of effort. But they're very strong abstractions. This is something that Trungpa Rinpoche promoted quite a bit and thought was very important. That's something perhaps we can do a class on at some point. So another way of just breaking down, using concepts to break down what the awareness is doing and where to place your attention. But it's just more playing around with concepts and introducing someone to different aspects of the mind that seem to be universal. Mindfulness of awareness, or mindfulness of livelihood, for that matter, would be not just mindfulness of how you make your living, but mindfulness of the actual living quality of one. You're actually there, and you're actually aware that you're a living being. You bring your awareness into that particular area. Mindfulness of mind would be bringing your awareness into the mental aspect of your beingness, of your existence, of your the entirety of your experience. Mindfulness of effort might come into the energy that we're putting into actually just being in place. You're actually there. You're not going to get up. You're not going to leave the room just because you have an impulse to go do that. There's mindfulness of effort, the effort to actually stay on the cushion and train the mind. It's a little philosophical for some people. And the other thing I would say is and emphasize, which I've already mentioned, but I would emphasize that everyone is so different. Everyone's causes and conditions, the karma that you personally bring to the cushion is just completely unique. There's no one. It's like fingerprints are not alike. Well, karma is not alike either. And so when we come and we sit down on the cushion, there's a completely new situation happening for you. And so we need some support. I'm very much interested in supporting someone's practice, but I tend to want to stay out of their head. When I say stay out of someone's thinking process, to allow them to experience their craziness or their lack of clarity on their own, so they can actually experience the negative parts of their mind, rather than try to clear that up prematurely, you could say, by, well, let's do this, and then we'll be doing better. There's some kind of a materialistic approach happening there, I'd say. So the awareness, the history, which I'm not a scholar, historian either, but the history of working with the mind is very extensive and goes back into the Theravadan tradition, the Vipassana of scanning the body and so on, of actually contemplating a pile of bones on the floor. There's just all kinds of things that, just different techniques that people have developed down through the centuries to try to get the awareness to see what is true fundamentally. So it gets complicated. Breath awareness being very traditional and quite. I think it's called anapanasati. Is that correct? Anapanasati. So, have to check with people with good memories. So, and then the other one is let's see. That one's not going to come up, another Pali word. about resting in the intelligence or resting in one's fundamental nature. So to come back to square one here, not particularly differentiating between mindfulness practice as the emphasis or the resting in tranquility part, and develop some kind of person awareness or identity that's resting in tranquility. I prefer to teach it more open, so that when you come in and sit down, the feeling of being kind of lost, I think, is very valuable. To come in and actually sit down, hold still, and know that the only instruction you're getting from me is hold very still, watch what moves. And of course, the breath is moving, you can watch the breath. But I think it seems to be better if, rather than it is a direction for you need to follow your breath, label thinking, rather than do that. For me, and working with students over the decades, it seems to be more helpful for someone to just hold still and watch what moves. And that may be just thought patterns that one is watching. And then they may watch that for a while, then they may follow the breath for a little while. They may follow the sounds of birds outside the window. But without any kind of, I shouldn't be doing that, that's thinking I need to come back to my breath and abandon the birds sound. But something about that is I prefer not to promote. Question, yes, Shazan.
Could you say how Samatha and Vipashyana look when they arise in shikantaza?
I can, and so there would be more of a precision quality happening with, or more of the detail of things. Sometimes I call it, I start people out by saying, look, when emotions arise, rather than do something, rather than label it, or and leave it, rather than do anything with it, just go into it as far as you can. Go into the texture of the feeling. And if you go into the texture of the feeling, in order for something to have texture, there needs to be something there, and then there needs to be space around it. I often use the example of nap and what is called nap in carpeting. In order to have any nap in the carpeting, you have to have space around the parts of the fabric that are standing up. In shikantaza, I think that which translates as just precisely this, what is happening is that we're actually seeing the detail, and then we may space out, and then there may be an open quality that's there. Sometimes that open quality can be experienced as boredom, as kind of a empty, useless kind of situation that we can find ourselves in. It's a very open space with there's no value happening there. But sometimes this is the first things the first primitive concepts or feelings or emotions or understandings that arise as the ego-centered mind begins to approach an understanding of the truth, which would be egolessness. Begins as no self, no self, no self. This is the Hinayana path. And then at some point there's no other, no other, no other, the Mahayana path. And it seems to need to take place with each person rather than just be a blanket thing that everybody needs to do. It seems to be very good if people can do that very individually on their own with the help of the teacher, and also with the help of the Sangha. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha seems to be very, very important. The Sangha is quite often overlooked as that's just a group of people that are studying this, but they need to come together and study and rub shoulders with each other, and so that you can actually see, when you're studying with someone, you can actually see that your understanding and someone else's understanding are actually not the same. They're different. You see, everyone approaches the teachings different. Not a matter of right or wrong, but it could be a matter of more clarity, of less fixation. That could occur too, and those kinds of things happen in consciousness without being particularly supercharged by any kind of thinking process or judging.
So the detail is the mindfulness.
The detail is the mindfulness, and the space is the vipassana, or vipassana rather.
And there's a difference between vipassana and vipassana.
Vipassana, vipassana is panoramic awareness. Vipassana is what is taught in the Theravadan tradition and I have not practiced that, and so I've just read about it. But forms quite often with the eyes closed, scanning the body, and very, doing pretty extensive practice. But it's about working on no self.
The vipassana has the yana at the end, like Mahayana.
Yeah.
Do you know what the path is?
I'm not sure how that breaks down, but you could find a Sanskrit dictionary and probably find the source words for that. But it's usually not pronounced like Vipashyana. It's a Vipassana. That's how I was taught. So, yes.
What are the preconceptions about negative feelings that tend to make us want to go into something else?
Well, they hurt, or they're painful. If negative feelings are sticky or gooey or smelly or painful, or we don't like it. Just the quality of it is difficult or threatening or unpleasant. So I'm not sure what specifically you're looking for. We have to use concepts. If I say smelly to someone who can't smell, who's never had that particular consciousness or organ or object occur, then there's not going to be any communication happening there. So, but you know what I'm saying when I say that.
It seems like I have the intention to feel negative feelings as they arise, but quite often when they do arise, I want to go into something else without much of a thought about it. So what is that?
It's awareness.
Can I relate to that?
Just like you're doing. There isn't the idea, we're not attempting to get rid of anything. And even though I sometimes say just include, we're really not even intending to include anything. But just be aware. So just what I would say, how you can relate to that is more time on the cushion. Give yourself, you could say, have a willingness to put effort into that. Bring yourself to the cushion, sit down, watch how that arises. Just keep looking at it. More.
Not yet.
Michael.
This concept of precision. As you go deeper into it, it seems that it dissolves.
Okay.
Is that where you're talking about openness or space?
Well, it could be. Something is there, and then there's space around it. So we're precise about the objective part is being precise about the details of things, of the emotions, the thoughts that arise. We just observe them. And then there's you could say there's an expansion that happens out of that. It happens naturally rather than something. Shamatha is something you kind of do, whereas Vipassana is something that you are. But there's no credential involved. There's a credential involved in it. Then we're back to spiritual materialism. We're trying to get somewhere using spiritual techniques. We're trying to get to be a more enlightened ego. They're all over the place. They're all over the news. They're all over the media. They're all over the modern age or new age stuff.
A question from Jay in Saginaw.
Just Jay.
His question is, since there's no self, what is watching? What continues to move?
So it's just awareness, but it doesn't, awareness really can't see itself. It's just the nature of, it's just the way everything is set up. But to ask that question it's a good question. You could ask that on the cushion or not. Yes,
A question from Sandro in New York.
yes, Sandra.
He asks, in the context of no other, are other people's thoughts or views or confusion part of my own awareness, just like surprising thoughts that arise when I'm on the cushion?
Well, they're certainly not separate from it. So, but it seems to be better to, rather than to work with that as a concept, as something that you need to grasp onto some kind of a concept of it, is just as to watch the separation. In other words, see the way you separate yourself from others with your interpretation, your judgment, your evaluation of other people. The thing that's very interesting, we can't exactly see the way in which we're confused about something or the way in which we're kind of self-centered about something. But isn't it amazing how clear we are about other people? It's so easy to see the way in which other people are just not very clear, or are all wound up in themselves, or their statements are very kind of pretentious or self-centered, or backed up by some kind of a subtle belief in their authenticity. So again, to address what Sandra is asking about there, the important thing there is just continue. So the question reveals that the awareness is going in that direction, and what I would say is just continue to do it without any particular goal, without like, well, I have to find out, I have to see what is it that way or not. The either or situation is just a trap. Yes.
So a follow-up question from him. So it's not your confusion, it's just exactly confusion?
It's just confusion. Confusion doesn't belong to anyone, nor does awakening. There's no owner of anything. On the other hand, you could go the other way and say there isn't anything you don't own. More there?
Not from him.
Michael?
Is confusion started when we start to name something?
That tends to seal it up, like the five dharmas of the Lankavatara Sutra. Something happens, we name it. Something happens, we give it a name, and then we project other ideas on top of that. The name seems to be a, kind of like a post-it note
So,
for everything else. Mhm.
so depression, we say that person is depressed.
Mhm.
That's just a name. We really don't
Yeah,
know.
and when you say, as soon as you name something, it's not that you shouldn't name. So but it's about awareness that as soon as you name anything at all, either this direction or the apparent that direction, you've stopped investigation. The earth is flat. End of story. The earth is flat. Why should we go any further? The same thing we're doing with ourselves, with our own mind. Well, I'm depressed. Don't say that. Or if you do, just be aware. Bring as much awareness as you can that there's something there that is going on that seems to be very difficult or painful or negative or somehow unworkable from your point of view, and you're calling it depression, or other people would call that depression. But if you have 10 people and everyone is having negative feelings and they're all calling what's happening with them depression, if you could actually see down into each one of those things, I have very, very strong doubts. And I'm an old man. I've been here a long time. I've been looking at a whole lot of negative stuff here and talking to a whole lot of negative things going with my friends and family, students, and so on. And I have very strong doubts that of those 10 people that are all saying I'm depressed, that there's even 2 of them that are experiencing the same thing. But they call it the same thing, and then because the community wants to make money, and wants to relate to the problem. And I'm not saying this is incorrect or wrong or bad, but we tend to medicate these people rather than trying to investigate. We want to stop the symptom rather than see what is that. You have a cup with the name Bob on it. Yes.
So the 10 people that are saying that they're experiencing
Yes.
depression, probably aren't experiencing the same thing.
Probably not.
What is it that makes it so easy to identify with another person that seems to be having a similar experience to yourself?
Language, talk. If you say, I'm feeling very depressed, and the other person might say, yeah, I know what you mean, I am too, feeling very depressed. So it's a word. As soon as you say the word, it gives you some, there's some community going on there, but it's still a word. So, and I'm also not saying, I'm not saying there aren't some people who really, the only thing you can do with these people is to medicate them. I mean, because you have to do that. Whereas other people may have that same thing, and they might be better off to talk to a therapist, or they might be better off to practice meditation, practice an awareness practice. They might be better off to do Tai Chi or yoga. But it could be investigated. We could actually go in. Of course, I'm very biased. I think people should meditate. But I'm also very respectful of people's karma and where people are at in their particular path, their life. Some people are not ready to do this. They really need to do something else with their life. This is not their lifetime to be meditators. Meditation is extremely hard to do. And when I say extremely, it's just that there's so little payoff. You just almost have to be transcendentally stubborn to even do this. It's difficult. Not many merit badges. Yes, sir.
When we name and value something, how does that add to the pain, the suffering?
Paraphrase your question.
We call someone,
Mm-hmm.
we say they have depression.
Yes. How does that add to the suffering?
Yes, how does that add to the suffering rather than being open to the...
Because there's no exploration going on there. There's no openness. We're jumping to, as they say, jumping to a conclusion about it. Well, this is this is that. This is caused by this, and the reason you're depressed is because you don't have a job, or the reason you're depressed is, we're always looking for a cause and effect situation. That's why I often say, for meditators, insofar as you can, don't hang around with why questions too much. Go to a what question. What is this? When I sit down, or anyone sits down and faces the wall, what is that? What is that? Or you could even say, who is that? Who is this? What is this? Let's fundamentally investigate this rather than jump on some kind of a circular hunt for something. Yes.
So is mindfulness an exploration?
It's the beginning. You're actually sitting down in the workshop rather than wandering around, going from one booth to the next, trying to find out who's selling what, who's got what will work. More.
Yes, Shara from Taipei.
Shara from Taipei.
Her question is, to what extent is remembering all the terminology we're studying important? I find it a bit difficult to keep track of it all.
We'll do some of it. So how important is it? I don't know, I can't remember. I was just trying to remember a Sanskrit word a few minutes ago. I can't remember all the words. I mean, I remember a lot because I've studied a lot, but can't always remember. Like, I think it took me several years to remember the 12 links in the chain of existence. They're very important, but it took a while. Finally I sat down back, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago and just forced myself to make them stick. And I still can't remember them. Yes.
Another question from Jay up in Saginaw.
Yes.
He asks, the awareness practice seems to make my, quote, depression, unquote, feel stronger and I can become less functional. How does someone relate to something that feels so debilitating?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, first of all, I would say you should trust yourself. Maybe you need to do something else. Maybe you need to take a break. I don't know. It's possible. But I think the other thing you could do is you could go deeper into it. You could spend more time on the cushion. You could, and when I'm speaking to Jay specifically, I would say, Jay, you're a young guy. You're what, 23, 24. So I would say extended practice rather than say go into it and say, well, meditation is have some kind of a commentary that's spontaneously coming up. Meditation is making it worse. So probably not. Probably what is actually happening is the awareness practice that you're doing is you're actually seeing the way the whole thing works, and it looks pretty insurmountable, or it looks very challenging, or it looks like it's going to be just way too difficult. And I would say, and I probably should have a face-to-face interview around this at some point, but I would say more sitting. And I wouldn't necessarily say this to everyone, necessarily. So I'm not saying that this is everybody that feels bad when they meditate, if it makes them, seems like it makes them feel worse to meditate more, they should just sit, more. Not necessarily. I think it's very, very individual. There's so many causes, there's the person's job situation, there's the relationships that one is involved in, there's just your own personal dynamics of what you've been through in whatever has happened in your life. All those things, you can't leave anything out. Everything has to be included and looked at and observed and felt and understood, rather than you're just going to wipe the slate clean and just just do meditation anyway. So a few minutes ago, I said you have to be transcendentally stubborn. Well, I think that's true too. We have to just. But in Jay, in your case, you're the one that has to do this. I can't just come in and just pour a bunch of stubbornness into you. You're already pretty stubborn, as I remember. So, there's different ways of working with this. You could cut back. You could maybe increase the amount of sitting that you're doing, but shorten the span. So in other words, instead of sitting for a solid hour, you could sit in 10-minute increments over the day. Sit for 10 minutes, depending on what your job and your livelihood situation is like. So there's different ways of working with it. Nothing else is coming up around that other than I think it's so very, very individual. I'd be very careful of laying on how much you're laying a word like depression or like whatever you're laying on, and you're covering up something you really should probably be investigating. More?
Another question from Sandra.
Yes, Sandra.
If I name it, doesn't that build on my idea of separation rather than seeing what is happening?
Yes, it does. And so But the thing that I think is important to remember is it's not about not naming something. It's about seeing that when you do name something, you can, if the awareness is strong, you can see the degree to which you're using that as a way of not not exploring any deeper. So it's not about getting rid of the naming and never naming again. Though in someone's path that could start to back off so that you would do very little of that. You would just do it as an expedient measure to communicate with people, to communicate with yourself, to interact. But it wouldn't be used as some kind of a shield against protecting yourself from seeing the underbelly of something that really needs to be explored and looked at.
A question from William Murray.
Yes, William.
Grand Rapids area. I read stories about how a few people instantly wake up, but why can't we just wake up? If this is all there is and I see glimpses of no self, why is it not dropping off?
Sit more. When you say, why is it not dropping off? It's like standing on the side, from the way it looks over here, it's like you're standing on the side of the mountain looking at the path and saying, why aren't I at the top? What am I doing here halfway up the mountain? And so I'm not, it's for me to come back and say, well, you dumbass, you need to keep going. Sit here, you're camping out and you're sitting on a park bench. And I'm saying, let's go. Keep going. What does that mean? That means keep studying. Use this incredible structure that's come down through us over the centuries. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the example of someone who is awake. The Buddha. The Dharma, the truth that he taught. Everything is dependently arisen. There's not a separate thing anywhere. Everything is dependent on everything else. This is why it's so complicated. This is why we really need to bring as much respect as we can, not only to our own psychology, but to the psychology of others. And not make, you could even say lessen your demand on everything and heighten your awareness. So lessen the demand to have things a certain way or to have things change. The whole situation of having intense negativity, depression, whatever name you wanted to use, seems to be very important to bring awareness to that, and especially in the form of the 3 marks of existence. Nothing lasts. Nothing lasts. The most enjoyable, wonderful time you're having will not last. It's called the pain of alternation. The most horrible, terrible pain that you're having, physical, mental, will not last. It might have some more duration if you fiddle with it or try to push on it. But if you're just there and let it do what it needs to do, it's like living with a baboon. Living with a baboon?
You've lived with a baboon.
Haven't we all? Monkey mind. Living with just a mind that just wants to do this, wants to do that. And notice this. Just be aware that your intent, your understanding is to be happy. You want to be happy. This is what we want. We want to be happy. We want to be complete. We want to be, content. We want to just be alive. We're living beings. Our consciousness is coming through a particular living being. We would like to not have warfare. And yet we immediately go to war with all kinds of things. We have this crazy monkey. It's like some kind of a schizophrenia or something. So we have to fundamentally make friends with yourself. You have to make friends with that monkey. You can't fight. You can't get rid of it. It's not real. You could say, well, how can you make friends with something that's not real? Well, you probably can, but you need to see it. When I say you need to see it, you don't need to do anything. You can continue to do exactly what you're doing. From now on, yes.
A question from Gyokudo up in Minneapolis.
Yes, Yokodo.
She asks, can looking more deeply into our negativity fuel it?
It might appear to, but if there's actually just observing that negativity, observing the texture and the feeling and the qualities that are happening there? Probably not, because one of the things that seems to happen when we look real deeply into the negativity is we begin to see where it gets its nourishment from. We begin to see where the negativity, the way in which it has a strategy for staying there, for staying negative and staying alive, like a parasite. Michael?
Is one of the problems by using names is that we put a name on something, and thus that thing cannot change because we've named it. When
I think there's something
in
to that.
reality, it's always changing.
But yeah, there's something to that. Everything's shifting a little bit all the time. That's why they call some people shifty. Yes,
A question from Anna Maria in New York.
we have a lot of people out there today.
Yeah. And
Yes, Anna Maria.
does the body know negativity?
Does it know negativity?
K-N-O-W.
Yeah. Body mind are not separate. They just look like they are. When you realize, which I hope you do, the body mind are no longer two different things, and therefore you're never going to know what you're going to say next. You never know what you're going to do next. That freaks ego out because ego does not want to look bad. So ego wants to stay in control and just make sure we don't do anything funny or shifty. Make sure we have a good appearance, have a good haircut. Make sure our, fiddle around with ourselves and make sure we're okay mentally, physically. But realization blows the whole ego-centered thing up. It just blows it up. So you're no longer separate from your own body, mind, from the world, from the floor, from the wall. It's not some kind of mystical, oh my, I'm so at one with everything. Isn't this delightful? Too bad you don't feel that way. Actually, if you realize you see it, this is everyone's birthright. Everyone has it. Everyone can do this. Even the fellow out in the parking lot today that keeps bumming money from us and won't do any work. Yeah, I'll shovel that. I'll do that. Here, give me some money.
Another question from Anne Maria. If we had no name for depression, painful, sorrow, joy, etc., would our body naturally feel the impulse to embrace or reject based on nature of each's energy?
Are you writing a book, Anna Maria? The only way I can answer that is I don't know. That's the only way I can do it. Nice try.
Another question from Sandra.
I'll take one from Sandra, Dr. Sandra.
He asks, isn't it frightening to see that someone else's pain or psychosis isn't separate from me?
I'd say so. No, I would definitely say so. And this is a kind of brings about, you could say, for lack of a better word, there might be a better word that I don't know, but a kind of humility that doesn't show up to other people as, oh my, you're so humble, but a kind of feeling yourself of how completely helpless we are as separate beings. We're helpless as separate beings. If you want to be, unless you supercharge the ego and become some kind of a universal monarch or something. Further?
No, but Shara has another question.
Go ahead.
She asks, how do we talk to someone who is contemplating suicide, especially if the tension appears to be more of what they want? How do we approach that?
I think it's very important to have respect for people. The causes and conditions that lead up to someone saying, I want to end this, I want to leave. I'm not validating that. I'm not saying that's correct, but we need to be very careful to respect someone else's karma, respect what they're going through, and that is not respectful to scold somebody and or try to stop them from taking their life. I'm not saying you shouldn't do something about it, of course, but it should come out of some kind of understanding of what's happening with them. So take some time to get to know them. If you're going to, say, intervene or interfere, some of these, suicide hotlines, I'm not saying they're not helping people, probably are, but as individuals, we need to, if we have a friend or a relative or a partner or ourselves, if we want to, as much awareness as we can bring in there seems to be really important. I often say, I'm saying right now, I say it over and over again, and it may sound kind of like, well, that's really not so helpful, but I say, don't do anything unless you have to. Don't do anything unless you have to. If you don't have to do it, don't do it. And that makes life a lot simpler. It's sometimes called patience.
Is seeing someone suffering the same thing as being with all beings?
It might be. It might be. It's not. It's just being with them. And if you're really with this, if you've learned, if you've understood, if you're really with this, and you're all through, the warfare is just not happening anymore, then when you're relating to someone else, no matter how much warfare is happening with them, you won't join the fray, and you won't accept, reject, or look away from them. You'll be with them because you're not really separate. We're not really separate from each other. The fundamental situation sure looks like it, but that's why it's difficult. It looks like a big stage set. So we can close now?
No, we have one over here.
Oh, go ahead.
Would you find ending the warfare in here, releasing the monkey mind, and I can't remember the other benefits, but you had mentioned numerous benefits of this practice, which is meditation. Would you find those as payoffs?
I wouldn't say they're payoffs, no. The way you describe them is very conceptually, it could be understood that way, but it doesn't appear that way when it happens. Because it's not really an occurrence in the sense that I used to be this way, now I'm that way. What happens is the emotions, the feelings, the negativity is still there. It just doesn't belong to anyone anymore. There's no solid being anywhere. That's why the Buddha, when he awoke, said, life is suffering. And people quite often say, well, that's a nihilistic religion. No, it's not. Not nihilistic. It's true. Life is very stressful. Just having nerve endings, pretty much. Just having nerve endings, just in your hand. That hurts. This feels good. Same nerve ending. So, good luck.
We'll dedicate the merit in the back of your chant books, and please remember our donation boxes in the hallway and online.
May the merit penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jivo Sanji Shibu Shisongu Samoko Sa Moko 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
To the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, including the 5 wisdom Buddhas, Vairochana, Akshobhya, Amitabha, Ratnasambhava, Amoghasiddhi, and their consorts, please hear us. To the Bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra, Vajrapani, Avalokiteshvara, Ratnapani, Vishvapani, and the protector, Jizo Bodhisattva, please hear us. We ask you, supplicate you all to bring down the light to heal and protect all of the Sangha, the students and practitioners, the family and friends of Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, its buildings, houses, rooms, and everything in the gardens and adjoining grounds from any negative energy or the dark forces. Bring down light and protect us now.